In this video from ITFreeTraining, I will look at how to configure Teredo on Windows. Teredo is an IP6 transition technology that allows computers without a native IP6 connection to access IP6 networks. There are some tricks to configuring Teredo. In this video, I will cover the more common problems you will have configuring the protocol. For the network setup, I will use a domain laptop that is connected to a home network. Domain computers can act a little differently from non-domain computers. Later in the video, we will see why. Since the laptop is connected to a home network, it will not be able to access a domain controller. The home network does not support IP6. In order to access the IP6 network, Teredo will use the IP4 network. I will now change to my Windows 10 computer to look at how to configure Teredo. The procedure for configuring Teredo is the same for each edition of Windows that supports it. What may be different is if it is enabled by default. In Windows 10, Teredo is enabled by default. However, additional configurations may need to be done for it to work. To start with, I will have a look at the network configuration on this computer. To do this, I will right-click on the Start menu and then select the option Network Connections. There is one network adapter on this computer. I will right-click on the network adapter and select the option Properties. From Properties, I will next scroll down and select the IP6 protocol. Notice that protocol is ticked and now enabled. Unlike protocols such as ISATAP, the IP6 protocol needs to be enabled. If I now press the Properties button, you will notice that the IP address and DNS servers are configured to automatic. Since Teredo works when IP6 is not available, it makes sense for it to not be configured. If IP6 becomes available on the network, the computer will automatically be configured to use IP6 and Teredo will be disabled. This is what you want, since Teredo is a transition protocol and is only meant to be used when IP6 is not available. The next step is to configure Teredo. To do this, I will close all these windows, right-click the Start menu, and open a command prompt. Once the command prompt is open, I will next run the command IPConfig to show the network configuration on this computer. Notice at the bottom of the screen is the Teredo adapter. This will show the configuration of the network adapter. If the Teredo protocol is disabled, it will appear with a media state of media disconnected. If the computer has been configured with an IP6 connection, the Teredo adapter will automatically be removed since it is not required. In Windows 10, Teredo is enabled by default. You can tell the protocol is enabled as an IP6 address has been configured. As we'll see later in the video, the IP6 address contains information such as the Teredo server and IP4 address of the Teredo client. To test the configuration, I will attempt to ping Google, making sure I use the -6 switch to force IP6 to be used. You will notice that the message Destination Host Unreachable is appearing. Teredo is enabled, but it is not working. Let's have a look why. To configure Teredo, I will run the command netsh. Netsh is a command line scripting tool that can be used to configure network settings on the computer. When I run netsh, I will get a command prompt called netsh. From here, I can run additional commands. From the prompt, I will run the command interface Teredo. Once the command has run, notice the prompt has changed to indicate Teredo is being configured. To show the current configuration, I will now run the command show state. Notice that at the top, the type is listed as client. This means it is enabled. If you want to disable Teredo, run the command set state disabled. Once run, if I run show state, notice that the type has changed to disabled. Depending on which version of Windows you are running, Teredo may be disabled. If I enable Teredo on this computer, it will not work. The reason is the server is currently set to the Microsoft Teredo server. The Teredo servers run by Microsoft have been shut down. Microsoft always intended to do this. The idea was they wanted to help promote the use of the IP6 protocol and help with its adoption, but Microsoft did not intend for the Teredo servers to be available in the long term. In order to get Teredo running on this computer, I will need to use another Teredo server. To find a public Teredo server, I will need to perform a Google search to find any currently available Teredo servers. Your ISP may also be running a Teredo server you can use. If you simply want to enable Teredo and not change the server, run the command set state client. This will enable Teredo and not make any additional changes. To change the server as well, add the server's DNS name after the command. This server was found using Google. This command can also be used to configure other options like a refresh time and client and server ports if you need to. Now that the configuration has been changed, I will quit NetSH. To test Teredo, I will once again ping Google. You will notice that the ping command is still not working. Since Teredo has just been configured, sometimes it will not work right away. In most cases, you can disable and enable the network card and this will fix the problem. In other cases, you will need to restart the computer. In this case, I will disable and enable the network card. To do this, I will right-click the Start menu and select Network Connections. Once open, I will right-click on my network adapter and select Disable. And then re-click the network adapter and re-enable it. Once the adapter has been enabled, I will run the ping command again. Notice this time a response is received back from Google. If this does not work, restart the computer and try again. I will now run IPConfig and have a look at the Teredo IP address. At the bottom, you can see the Teredo IP6 address. It may look fairly random, but it contains a lot of information. If I have a closer look at the Teredo IP address, there's a lot of information contained in the address itself. This can be broken down into different parts. A Teredo address always starts with the same prefix, so you can tell it is a Teredo address. The next 32 bits are the IP4 address of the Teredo server. It is important to point out that the IP4 address and UDP port are obfuscated. Obfuscation is the process of changing data to make it difficult for humans to understand. In this case, the bits of the address are inverted. Ones become zeros and zeros become ones. Even though it makes it difficult for humans to read, computers don't have any problem inverting the bits to understand the information. If I look at the part of the IP6 address that contains the IP4 server, if I invert the bits, this will give the following value. This value can then be converted into an IP4 address. This is the IP address of the Teredo server that was configured earlier in the video. If I inverted the part of the address containing the client IP address, this will give the public IP4 address the computer is using to access the Internet. You can see how the Teredo IP address contains a lot of useful information if you know how to access it. I will now change back to my Windows 10 computer and look at how to configure group policy for Teredo. To modify the local group policy, I will run the command gpedit.msc from the command prompt. Once open, I will go to Administrative Templates, Network, TCP/IP Setting, and then IP6 Transition Technologies. There are 5 different group policy settings that can be configured for Teredo. The first 4 are self-explanatory. The first one is Set Teredo Client Port. By default, the operating system will choose a UDP port to use. The administrator can configure Teredo to always use the same port. However, be aware that if you configure this setting and the port is in use, the Teredo client will fail to initialize. The next setting is Set Teredo Default Qualified. This setting allows the Teredo client to automatically become ready. If this setting is not configured, the Teredo client will enter a dormant state when not in use. The next setting is Set Teredo Refresh Rate. This setting configures how often the client will send a router solicitation packet to the Teredo server. This essentially refreshes the IP address and the UDP port mapping used by the client. The next setting is Set Teredo Server Name. This setting configures which Teredo server the client will connect to. The last setting is Set Teredo State. When I open the setting, the next step is to select Enabled. Once enabled, there are 4 different states that can be selected from the drop-down box. Default state will configure the Teredo client to the Windows default. Disabled state will disable Teredo. Client will enable the Teredo client. However, notice the setting at the bottom, Enterprise Client. By default, Teredo will not work when the computer is a member of a domain and a domain controller is contactable. If you want to change this, select the option Enterprise Client, and the Teredo client will operate even when a computer is in a domain with a contactable domain controller. Keep this in mind if you use Teredo in a domain, because if Windows can contact a domain controller, no matter what settings you configure, Teredo will not work unless it is configured to Enterprise Client. I hope you've enjoyed this video on Teredo and found it useful. For more free videos from us, please see our YouTube channel or webpage. Until next time, I would like to thank you for watching.